Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Wednesday, September 17th. Derek Van Riperino, Saris, Jed Lowry here with you on this episode. We dig into the push for playoff positions in the National League. The Diamondbacks are now a bigger part of the conversation than they were just 1 week ago. So we'll take a look at how they're stacking up against the Giants, the situation with the Reds still hanging around, the NL West still up for grabs. A lot to cover on that side. We got our first look at Bryce Eldridge earlier this week, so we'll have some takeaways there. I snuck a reverse mailbag question onto the rundown about James Wood. He is rapidly approaching the single-season strikeout record, and I wanted to know, is this the James Wood that we're likely to get for the next few years, or will that strikeout problem go away? We've got the new segment, Eno's Coach's Corner, in which we talk a little bit about specialization in sport, as well as establishing credibility as a coach. So a lot of ground to cover there. And of course, as we do every day, we have some baseball news you should know as we get started. Here's a great one for you guys. Shohei Ohtani threw 5 no-hit innings, hit his 50th home run of the season, and still ended up on the losing side as the Phillies dropped the Dodgers yet again. Rafael Marchand hit a huge home run to swing that one late for the Phillies because, as I said yesterday, I think everything's coming up Phillies right now. I had to double check. At first, I was like, there's no way anyone's ever come close to doing this before. The 5 no-hit innings and the 50th home run in the season. The only person who I thought could have maybe done it was Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth actually wasn't really close to doing it because Babe Ruth only pitched sparingly after the 1919 season, and a lot of his big homer seasons started happening right after that. But one thing I learned today, guys, in 1930, Babe Ruth pitched a complete game and won a season finale. It was a Yankees-Red Sox game, and he went 2 for 5 that day, but he didn't homer. And that was a season in which he hit 49 homers. So we almost had... Yeah, if he'd homered that day, he would have hit his 50th homer and thrown a complete game. It wouldn't have been a no-hitter, but that would have been a pretty damn impressive feat that probably would never be replicated. I think 5 no-hit innings on the same day you hit your 50th home run in the season is something we will never see again. And I feel like we're always ticking boxes like that with Shohei Ohtani. I mean, what else can this guy do, Jed?
I mean, first guy to ever start an all-star game as both a position player and a pitcher, 50-50 season, 50th home run after throwing 5 no-hit innings. These things are, it's video game like numbers and it's video game like performances. And I just, I hope everybody watching right now is enjoying and really like soaking in what they're actually watching.
This is funny because Babe Ruth played in a time when, there were no people from Japan playing in the big leagues. There were no people from many of the places that we have now. So, that's one way to sort of be like, well, Tani's doing it in an integrated time and like, therefore his stuff is like more impressive. But I do want to point out one thing. The second place in home runs in 1920 was 19. 19.
Yeah, Babe was hitting more home runs than teams combined.
Yes.
So you're talking about somebody who legitimately like you'd be hitting 200 homers a year if you were doing what Babe did back then.
Yeah, I mean, I guess last place is Pittsburgh with 107. So
there you go.
Shohei just got to hit 107.
57 more to go.
I'll never say never on Shohei Ohtani feats. So if we want to assume someday Shohei Ohtani will actually out homer a major league team, my money would probably be on the Pirates being the team that he out homers.
Unfortunately.
And last night, of course, brought back all the Tungsten arm O'Doyle jokes, which was maybe one of the all-time best tweets. That was from the Shohei Angels era, from Matt Tomic on Twitter at the time, right? Just unreal stuff that this continues to happen, that he can do all the stuff that he does and still come out on the losing side of games. Some other news you should know, the Astros are describing the Yordan Alvarez ankle injury as a pretty significant sprain. Our friend Chandler Rome, who joined us yesterday, was there as reporters were trying to ask Joe Espada for more details. They're not putting Alvarez on the IL because they asked Joe Espada that, and Espada's response was, "Did you just hear what I said? This is going to take some time. Listen, one day at a time. I'm not going to give you days, weeks, what we're going to do next." So it appears that the cagey approach to sharing injury information with the media is alive and well in Houston. Not a surprise at all after our conversation with Chandler. But the question that was coming up in our Discord was, why not place him on the IL if he's not coming back for a couple of weeks, even though you have slightly expanded rosters? Don't you just want to have one more player available? Because it seems pretty obvious that we're not going to see Alvarez for at least a couple of weeks, given the magnitude of that injury.
It was left ankle, correct? We're trying to remember the video. Yeah.
Yep.
I was thinking maybe there was an opportunity to pinch hit, but the left ankle, it's his back leg, so he's putting a lot of pressure on that, and
it's not the one that rolls over, right? Like sometimes the front ankle will roll over, so at least it's not the one that like kind of rolls over sometimes.
And I'm trying to think, but it is, the video was not good. Like it did not look good. So it's the outside, because I think his ankle turned over on the outside. Mm-hmm. So, his left ankle. So I guess rotating into that might take less time, because he's kind of turning on his left leg into the inside. So, maybe they're hoping to get a pinch hit at bat from him down the way, but I don't know. I'm just not in the clubhouse. I don't see what it looks like and see what that rehab will look like. But the only logical thing is like just to keep the bat fresh. Try to do whatever you can physically to stay ready for the playoffs.
Yeah. Maybe just logistically, they want as soon as he's ready to be able to play him. Like as opposed to like having to do any paperwork. But I maybe it's also just to save money and not bring a young guy up to the big leagues and pay him the major league salary. Although that's not much money they'd be saving
for 10 days.
Yeah, the Google machine tells me that a grade 2 ankle sprain generally requires recovery time of 3 to 8 weeks. Some sources suggesting at least 6 weeks for functional recovery. So, like you say, pretty significant. It's not a grade 1.
That was my translation as well, right? And I think since we have these grades, maybe we should just use them. Just to level things out, make it a little less subjective, give us a little more information. I don't think that's giving a lot away.
And they just like we covered with Chandler yesterday, was just they don't care about the fact that writers have to write something, give information out. They don't care about that, and they I guess they don't care also that it might make their players look bad because they're just saying it's an ankle sprain and he's gonna, if he misses the rest of the season, it makes him look bad for not coming back. But if they'd come out and said it's a grade 3 ankle sprain, everybody can write, hey, grade 3 ankle sprains take this long, so that's what you should expect, and don't get on his, on his back about it.
I will say this, after watching that video and him, just running in normally to home plate, if I'm the Houston Astros, I don't know what their plate is or if it's different. But I'm putting in a spongier plate, or some. You just can't have guys sliding across. It looked like ice that he was stepping on. The way that his foot slid across that home plate.
That was weird.
Yeah. I got some questions about that. Usually, home plate doesn't cause people to slip like that. Could there have been a ton of humidity or something, or from like a early pregame field watering, a little bit of extra moisture around the field, none of that really made sense to me. Also, of all the ways to get hurt running the bases, you'd expect it to be on one of the bags because they're raised, right? And you could just catch that wrong, even though you've run them hundreds of thousands of times in your life. But that seems like the last place you should get hurt running the bases, which kind of taps into the unbelievably bad luck they've had kind of swirling around on the health front in Houston. They managed to hold off last night. They won last night. 6-5. AJ Bluebaugh looked great for 3 innings. They used Colton Gordon for 3, Jaden Murray with a scoreless inning, and then they had some trouble late. Aniel De Los Santos gave up, I think, 4 earned in less than an inning. So The Rangers made it interesting, but the Astros held on again. They're finding a way despite all of these things that keep happening. I think that's been the fascinating part of this stretch run for them.
Yeah, and just to like final thought on the home plates, like I don't know if there's a uniform plate that every team uses. I anecdotally, I could tell you that some of them feel different than the other when you step on them with your spikes. And so, I like that's why I brought it up, because whatever the home plate it is, that thing has got to be changed out. I can't have my players slipping across home plate like that.
I've also noticed there's like a spray that you use to clean it up. And I don't know if that's some sort of like non-stick to kind of keep the dirt off a little bit or something, but there's like a spray that people use when they're preparing the field. So I don't know exactly what that spray is.
Yeah, and I, DVR, you brought up the idea of humidity. Maybe they're all the same home plate and they just, wear in differently depending on the climate, all that. But if that's the case, and and this one is, needs to be replaced, I just, like I said, I watched that video and I just don't think he did anything wrong in that moment. It's just, to your point, just bad luck. And if there's something I can do as a team to address that, to make sure it doesn't happen again, I'm doing it.
Yeah. Seems like a great idea to investigate that
and
if they didn't do it already.
A little note on Blue Ball. I'm going to ping Chandler because Blue Ball caught a little stray randomly in our conversation where he said he thought the organization was headed towards using Blue Ball as a reliever. I want to unpack that a little bit with Chandler because all the innings are there in the minors for Blue Ball. And with the fastball, slider, and change, he looks like he has a full mix. All of them rate above average by Stuff Plus, decent velo, and good command. So maybe there was a little bit of a velo boost for his start there. He was sitting 93.5 in AAA and 94.8. In the game yesterday. So maybe that was just some of it being like, I'm in the big leagues now. But this is 25 innings now. He's sat 94 plus. So I think this is a really good pitcher, maybe better than his projections suggest.
Yeah, he's been intriguing. He's pitched well during his time in the big leagues so far. So I was surprised when Chandler said that as well. Maybe we'll get some further details on that at some point. Maybe Needs will just nudge him into a starting role anyway. We'll have to wait and see on that front.
Like they were using Gusto as a starter, and he was pretty obviously a reliever for me.
Right. I think Gusto looked more like, if they were going to have a long reliever, a 3-inning, one time to the lineup sort of guy, Gusto looked more like that than Blue Ball to me as well. Some other news you should know, Trevor Megill is going to be reevaluated due to soreness. This is just, unfortunately, not surprising given the nature of his injury. Tried to ramp it up and just doesn't quite feel right, according to Jack Stern of BrewerFanatic.com. So I have reached the point, guys, where I am not expecting Trevor Megill to return at all in the regular season. And I think it's a little bit like the Josh Hader thing, where unless this proves to be just some routine soreness, if such a thing exists, he's not going to have enough time because of his layoff to ramp back up and be a contributor until very late in the playoffs, if even at all.
Yeah, I think that workload, that jump in workload too, probably puts him at even greater risk of injury. If he takes off that amount of time and they put him in the environment, the playoff environment where adrenaline
like
is higher,
4 outs or throw as hard as you can.
And after coming off of a break and where you're not, your ligaments and tissue is not used to that type of workload. That's a scary one right there for me if I'm looking at him as a long-term piece.
Puts pressure on some of the sort of underbelly of the bullpen. I do think Abner Uribe, Jared Koenig, and Aaron Ashby are like a pretty good threesome. I don't know that I would make them top 5 in the playoffs, but I wouldn't put them in the bottom 5 either. There's just sort of a kind of a middling situation there. As good as Abner Uribe is, he's wild at times. The other two guys, they don't stack up to like a Mason Miller as a setup guy, like not many teams do. So I think that's fine. But where they will get hurt a little bit is that the Milwaukee Brewers of the past have been a team that take their pitchers out early and do a little bit of the pitching chaos. They may need to leave their starters in a little bit longer. They may need to get that extra out or two in the 5th and the 6th from Woodruff and Mizorowski and Peralta, because do you want to hand the ball to Eric Fetty or Chad Patrick or Tobias Myers, or do you want to hand the ball to Aaron Ashby? And I think that's going to be a pain point for the Brewers now in the playoffs.
Yeah, it was a grade 1 flexor strain, you might remember, that originally put Megill down. But I think if you were saying, who are they similar to bullpen-wise in terms of quality and depth right now? We talked about the Blue Jays a little bit yesterday.
Yeah.
Probably on a similar level to that. Good enough.
But they're kind of missing the Braden Fisher, Brennan Little guy. Do you see guys that they're kind of trying out right now that could ostensibly be October surprises, I don't.
I think that's sort of what they've been doing with Myers in shorter stints. I think they're kind of tinkering with what he looks like as less of a bulk guy. It's not overpowering with a big strikeout rate, but I think he's sort of in that, what else can we do with him middle ground right now? So we'll see if anyone else kind of pops up here in these final few series. One flyby note, not much analysis to add here, but Willson Contreras' season is over due to a biceps strain. The Cardinals went ahead and put him on the IL, so make other plans. If you were using him as one of your 2 catchers, he'll lose that eligibility, of course, being a full-time first baseman this year. So tough ending for the season for Contreras. That overall was very productive, but as we talked about, it seemed like it had some high points of frustration throughout here in 2025.
How about this? Real quickly, where does Willson Contreras rank among first basemen only in WRC plus 500 plate appearances minimum?
6th.
It's not bad.
That's my guess.
I'll say 9th, just to throw a little bit further down.
You nailed it.
9th, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's great. I think, for the deal that they got him on, if they could just not think about all the baggage, I think that they'd be like, this is a pretty good player. He's on a decent deal. He's a pretty good player, and we should be happy to have him. But there is a lot of baggage. He was the guy that was supposed to replace Yachty.
That's their fault too, though. my insistence, they had a role in how things have gone up to this point. And they maybe were just wrong in the first place for making him that guy, given how great Yachty was defensively and given the questions we already had about Willson Contreras at the time of that signing and his defense.
It's probably worth saying too, is the 9th best, WRC plus first baseman, is that enough value though for the baggage to get you to the playoffs though too?
Yeah, I mean that's something they will probably be considering. But his average annual value is about $18 million. He's under contract till there's a 2028 option, and he'd probably be projected for about 2.5 wins next year. So, just by the sort of win surplus, I know some people really hate that analysis, but by that analysis, he does have about $10 million a year surplus.
There you go. Not a bad deal.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Let's check in on the NL playoff push. The Cardinals maybe falling safely out of that mix, not mathematically eliminated, but 4.5 back of the final wild card spot now. It's the Diamondbacks surging, right? We've been watching the Giants, the Diamondbacks, and the Reds, kind of wondering, of those 3 teams, which one is going to create the most headaches for the Mets? The Mets still holding on to the 1.5 game lead over Arizona, 3 games over the Reds and Giants. I feel like we had a massive jinx from the Discord. Mac, good friend of the show, frequent poster in there, had a picture from the Giants game on Friday night. They were celebrating on the field. And I think it's captioned it with something like, feels like there might be something here. And they've lost every game since that picture was taken.
So it really messed us up too, because our pre-production meeting's on Monday. So on Monday we were like, yeah, the Giants are in this thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now we're kind of like, are they in this thing? It's just been a brutal stretch.
3 and 7. Yeah, 3 and 7 in their last 10.
It's just like the middle of the pack team with the biggest amplitude. Are they good? Are they bad? I feel like the Giants maybe have won that award, which is not a fun roller coaster to be on from a fan perspective. But as you look at this team, you look at this race right now, I mean, they got a matinee. That'll be probably in the books by the time a lot of people get to hear this episode. So they have a chance to claw back one game against the D-backs before the series wraps. Like, where do you guys fall on this battle for the final wild card spot? Eno was kind of September baseball nihilist about the whole thing originally, just like, it doesn't matter, it's already decided. And he might be right, even though the path we're taking there is still wobbling just enough to where you don't feel like you're safe yet, but you probably still feel okay. Yeah, you stay in the course. You're not flip-flopping. What do you think about all this, Jed?
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at the Giants, I do think a positive is they have one of the easiest remaining schedules. They're out of it by 3, but they have 4 games with the Dodgers. You mentioned the one game with the D-backs. Then they have 3 with the Rockies and 3 with the Cardinals. So
nice finish.
That's a really, that's positive in there. But then you look at the starters, you got, Webb, Ray, and Verlander, who have all been, average to above average. And then everything else, the bullpen ranked 13th, offense 19th, defense 14th. It is, kind of this middling team that has an opportunity and they've just been so streaky, right? They went on, just like we talked about, went on this huge streak, and now all of a sudden it's back. And I think that is probably starting to show that the arms are kind of getting worn out. And so they're going to have to right the ship, but they have the schedule to do it. So I don't want to count them out yet, but because of the schedule, but everything else, they're not playing particularly well. They need a big start. And to save some of the bullpen arms. But like I said, I like their schedule. I just don't know if they've got enough gas down the line, down the end of the stretch here to finish it off.
There's an interesting tweet by Jay Kuda. He's kind of a fun follow. And he just did 2 days ago, he did the San Francisco Giants record. And he said the last 10 games, 5-5. Last 150 games, 75-75. Last 200 games, 100-100. Last 222, 101, 111, 111. And last 444, 200, and last 500, 250, 250. So if there's ever been a 500 team, it is the current Giants. But, part of the other side of this is, I put this thing together where we're just looking at wins above replacement here. Now, I think this is kind of interesting because it says the Phillies are top in the last 30 days in wins above replacement. And that actually fits their record and, how they're doing. And they're really streaking and they're really doing well. The Mets are second on this list, and they're below 500 over that time period. So it's a little weird to look at this team and be like, the bats are going, the relievers are, kind of top 5, top 6-ish. And they're figuring out the starters, and yet they're not winning. Whereas the Giants are, the 9th or 10th best team, by wins above replacement in the past. And the Diamondbacks are 12th. And yet they have better records than the Mets over the last 30 days. I think that just points to kind of the chaos of the inputs don't always line up. I was looking at the Mets schedule and it's like, they lost, 8 in a row. When you start looking at it, in one of those games, Nolan McLean pitches amazingly at Philadelphia, and Aaron Nola, who's been struggling all year, just drops zeros, and they lose the game 1-0, Then they score some, at Philadelphia. They score 4, and they do it off of Jesus Luzardo, and David Peterson holds it together, but Reed Garrett, who's been good all year, just blows the game. Then Jonah Tong, who looked amazing in his first one, looks terrible in his second one. So, there's just the kind of sequencing of when they score runs. They scored 19 and 10 and 12 runs, and then they didn't score any runs for a little bit. So, I think the Mets, long story short, I think the Mets are a much better team than the Giants, and that's why if you re-rack this a million times, you get the Mets in 70% of their 80% or 90% of the time, you get the Giants in a couple times. What's compelling though is, those times when it does happen against the grain and the Giants just find a way. The bullpen finds a way, even though they're out of gas, as producer Brian says. And, they just find ways to win games. And then all of a sudden you have these just these unbelievable heroes, that I think of Travis Ishikawa was like this guy in San Francisco that hit a homer in a St. Louis game that everyone was like, and it was like, that's, you kind of want that for, maybe this is Wilmer Flores' last year. Like it could be kind of a fun way for him to go out, is just to go on a burner here. And, despite them bringing up Bryce Eldridge, who we didn't even get to, which I do have a comp for him. I think I feel okay about the comp.
So let's go back to the Mets. I agree. I think they're, they are a better team overall than the Giants. And I like, their remaining schedule as well. I mean, they're 19th in terms of strength of schedule. So they've got 3 with the Cubs, 2 with the Padres, and then they've got the Nationals and Marlins for 3 each. So in my mind, they can control their own destiny. They're up a game and a half. The one thing, that wasn't captured in that chart is the defense. They've played below average defense all year. So I think that can come back to bite you in big situations. And, McLean has come in and done amazing. And you're really looking at Peterson and Holmes and, Tong and I guess, they have Sprout listed as their 5th guy right now. But they're 2-8 in their last 10 and they've won 2 in a row. So, they're going to have to get hot. They've got a decent schedule with the Nationals and Marlins remaining, or at least opponents that they should be able to handle. But once again, I think this comes down to them performing. I love the offense. I think the bullpen has the arms to go deep in the playoffs. I think it's going to come down to defense and what they can get out of their starters. But I like the names. I like the team. And I think they're in a good position. And it's kind of theirs to lose.
Are we buying Arizona at all? Like no one wants to talk about the D-backs. Like I think there's
such a flaw. Like you were talking about, the Mets have a flaw. Like, maybe their defense isn't so great and they have to sort of sort through some starting pitchers, but they have 6 starting pitchers, or 7, and they have, guys coming back, Megill's coming back. So they have options, and I think that they're going to do the Detroit Tigers, pitching chaos, where they just have all of these guys coming out 2-3 innings at a time, and I think it'll be fine. When we talk about flaws, though, like the Arizona Diamondbacks bullpen is maybe the biggest flaw of like anybody that's in this universe, like in the playoff universe. They have a negative WAR over the last 30 days, and none of the other top 15 teams over the last days are below 0 in any facet of the game. So I just think it's an unsurmountable flaw, because it just puts so much pressure on them to have to score a ton, and it puts pressure on their starters who aren't that great either. So it really means that they have to win games 6-5 and 8-6, and that's sustainable.
Yeah, and if you look at their remaining schedule, hardest in the game: Philadelphia for 3, Dodgers for 3, Padres for 3, Giants for 1.
All of those games could matter for each team involved, because the Dodgers still need to clinch the NL West. The Phillies are still trying to preserve a first round bye, possibly get the first seed in the NL. So you just have, and then the Padres are still just trying to get in and to chase the Dodgers. So it's like all of that tension.
You're not playing the
there.
B lineups and C lineups. You might get one hangover lineup in there if the Dodgers clinch one day, but that's it.
You might by the last weekend have some positioning that's locked in, and maybe things will ease up a little bit. But as it lines up, that is a really tough road to get in.
If they can, though, I mean, they're going to be in a strong position, right? Because they're going to go against a playoff environment, against all of these teams essentially, and it's just whether they can hold up, which I have a hard time imagining. But if they do it, watch out. That means they're getting hot at the right time.
And Gallen has looked more like himself over the last 10 starts or so. Ryan Nelson, I think earlier this year, just said, "I can't explain it. Don't ask." So just
Oh, I
he's
even
pitching
asked
well.
him about it. I asked
You
him
asked
about
him,
it.
like,
I
"Hey,
asked
how
him
are
why
you doing this?"
I was like, "Why is your fastball so good?" He's like, "I can't explain it. I don't know how." And I was like, "Are you a pronator or a supinator?" He's like, "I think neither."
Is that
And I was like,
possible?
what are you doing with your pitches? And he's like, "Man, I can't figure out the changeup really. I'm doing this with the slider and the curveball. I'm trying to separate them a little bit, and I think that it's going well, but I know what you're saying. I look up at the end of the game and I'll be like, I mixed some sliders and fastballs in, and you're like 70% fastballs. I know that's my game. It is my best pitch, and I don't really know why, but it is my best pitch."
Well, hey, it's working for him so far, and it's going to be really important if the D-backs do find their way in, because Nelson and Gallen both give them 6 pretty consistently, which does help them hide that bullpen flaw. But I think the longer the series, the more that would be exposed in a pretty big way if they are the surprising final wild card. And I also don't think it's going to happen, but they are hanging around nonetheless. You said you have a comp for Bryce Eldridge. We got the first look on Monday. Strike zone got really big for him. And what I saw was a pretty clear book, or at least a pretty clear plan from Zach Gallen. Down and away, a lot of down and away changeups, a little bit of up and in, but that seemed to be the book they started with, at least against Eldridge. And he did have a long flyout against, I think it's Taylor Rashi, who missed in the zone low against him. It would have been a homer in 23 out of 30 parks, and it was being a long flyout at Chase Field. So who is your comp for Bryce Eldridge based on his very first look in the big leagues?
Now, the way you get pitched does affect your tilt, so like there could be, this is too small of a sample to do this kind of analysis.
You mean three plate appearances is too small?
There were some swings, so we got some swings. I'm not doing comps based on like exit velos or anything like that. I'm just doing it on swing speed and tilt and where you made contact. So yes, it is an impossibly small sample. But then I looked at some video to kind of put the two together, and my comp is this: Nick Castellanos from the left side with a better eye.
So a taller, left-handed, better-eyed version of Nick Castellanos. That's a good player.
Yeah.
I mean, the swings were very similar. The bat speed was very similar. I was a little bit left cold by, it's about an average bat speed. But I actually thought that he laid off some really tough pitches from Gallen. There was a lot of changeups loaned away that he just spat on.
Agreed.
And he swung at one, and then he seemed to be like, I'm not swinging another one of those. Like, you got me, but now I can see that. Now I know what that is. And he made really good contact. He was, I guess I thought because of his defensive problems that the body wouldn't be as good, but I thought the body was good. I'm a little surprised that this guy's having athletic problems at first base. Maybe it's due to being tall or whatever, but like I thought he looked pretty lithe and swung pretty well. And the one thing that Nick has that I can't ascribe necessarily to Eldridge yet is a pretty good hit tool. Castellanos always had a really good hit tool. So, he could, if he has better eye than Castellanos, but not the same hit tool, it could be a very different kind of looking line in the end. But in terms of tilt, where he makes contact, and bat speed, that was the best comp.
Yeah, and I mean, you're talking about a guy. I'm looking at Castellanos' career numbers right now: 250 homer, 249, 270 hitter, 914 RBIs, 825 runs. That plays. I mean, that's a really good player. And I as I started looking at Eldridge, you're talking about a 20-year-old who was drafted in 2023, who's when I watched the video, I heard the announcer saying he's 6'7". He actually doesn't even look 6'7" to me. He still kind of has that like young kid's body. Looks really athletic. And the swing is actually, to me, really efficient. I think some people would describe it as effortless, which I think is the biggest misnomer in baseball. Like to be able to hit a ball as hard as that kid does, there's a lot of effort that goes into it. It's just really efficient. And to have a body like that, I mean, Aaron Judge-esque body, if you're talking 6'7", 240 at 20 years old, to move as efficiently as he does, I get why people, and then not only that, but you got a guy who, there's 3 years in the minor leagues, granted 2023 is A-ball and rookie ball, 905 OPS, 24 all the way up to AAA, 889 combined OPS, 2025, 843 OPS. Granted, his AAA at-bats are in Sacramento, and we know what that means in terms of
he struggled
how the ball
a little
flies.
bit this year. There was a little bit of shine came off, but I think he also adjusted back and was like, that's why they brought him up. Was like he started out poorly, that depressed some of the numbers, but I think more recently he's been a better player.
Yeah, but I agree with your take on his at bats. I was talking to DVR and how I wanted to watch all of his at bats and every single pitch. And I was very impressed. You could tell that first pitch, he kind of check swung on a fastball out of the zone because he was ready to let it eat. And his instincts took over, and he's like, you could tell he was like, all right, my first big league pitch, I'm going to hit this one out of the park. And he saw a fastball and tried to stop himself because he's like, oh, that's not a good pitch to hit. But he was committed to swinging. Right. Yeah. And then he went right from that, and he started taking changeups down out of the zone. The zone got big as well. But he stayed disciplined. I was very impressed with his composure, his eye at the plate. And I think because of that frame and because of the age and the efficiency that he has, I actually think there's more in the tank that as he matures and grows into that body, if he maintains that same swing. And I hope that he maintains like just a solid approach with that body where he doesn't try to do too much. Because with the swing that I saw him take in Arizona, where he nice, easy, like middle in to almost in pitch and almost hit it out left of center. That's special. That's something that is very hard to do, to take a pitch like that and hit it in the air with that much authority to the opposite field.
Yeah.
Potentially a big win for that system too. I mean, I realize he's the 16th overall pick, but to get a guy like that out of high school, to get him in the big leagues 2 years later, and to have that sort of game-changing power potential would be really big for the middle third of that lineup in the long run. Good news is we're going to see him back in the lineup today, according to our producer Brian Smith, hitting fifth, DHing defensively. I find it really hard to believe that with work, he wouldn't be able to play first base or play a corner outfield spot, at least at a passable sort of level. Because I saw some of the same things you did, Jed. I'm like, he looks athletic enough. He doesn't have the luggish sort of body. Like lug is the word that always comes up with Trevor Larnach's scouting report. Bryce Eldridge doesn't look like that. Bryce Eldridge looks like the kind of guy that if he wasn't swinging a baseball bat, he'd be catching touchdowns as a tight end for Penn State right now. Like that's the type of athleticism that he brings to the table.
So, we've maybe denigrated the player production system in San Francisco, but I'm looking around their depth chart right now, and there are, I think, some wins for them. Elliot Ramos I know he's got flaws in terms of base running and defense, but they got him to the big leagues, and he's got a good approach. He's the first right-hander to ever splash down in that park. So that's kind of a cool thing. And I think he's at least a league average regular. I think they should get some credit for Casey Schmidt. I don't know what Casey Schmidt's long-term role is, but they coached him into a situation where he can play any position on the diamond and play it well. And, he's also, I asked him about his plate discipline. He came up swinging at everything, and they even talked about it on the cast. And I joked about that with him, and he said, "Yeah, I just decided I shouldn't do that anymore." So, we're always looking for players that actually change their chase rate and keep it. And he's my candidate. So I think he was just a little bit in over his head in his first year, and he's settled down since. And then I think you got to give him credit for longtime guys like Logan Webb, and I'm interested to see where these pitchers turn out. But they turned out good relievers in Ryan Walker and Camilo Doval and Randy Rodriguez and Peguero right now, who's throwing 100-mile-an-hour sinkers and looks pretty nasty. So I wouldn't say that this is like I'm not going to give him top 10, player development, but I might say they're in the middle now. Does this look like a bottom 10 player development system for you?
Not an obviously bad one at all, but I think where they've been missing historically is the higher impact bats. Mm-hmm. It's a hard thing to do, right? Like that to me is just
but
always
the park
felt like
may have a role in that,
Sure.
Mm-hmm. You just get up there. I remember talking to Alex Gordon about this. He said he came up to Kaufman and he was like, taking his normal swings that normally hit homers and was just like, what? Why didn't that go out? And I feel like that's got to be something that every Giant rookie has ever felt.
Yeah, it doesn't help. No doubt. Coming out of PCL environments and then going there too, that probably makes that adjustment even more extreme. Producer Brian's going for the show MVP award today. There's a stat here that I almost can't believe. Since 2022, the Giants are 63-106 against the Dodgers, Padres, and Diamondbacks combined. That's a 373 winning percentage against those other three teams in the division. If you lump in the Rockies and everybody else, they're 252-216, a 538 winning percentage against those teams. I don't know what that means as much as it's just like there's a clear, within the division, there's a clear hierarchy of these are the teams that are perennial contenders, and we're a notch below that. So I didn't realize it was that bad.
Yeah, you're the fourth best team in the division right now. You got and you got those are the guys. I know you're playing the balanced schedule now, but those are the guys you're fighting with. And when you have those head-to-head matchups and you're losing that many games, it makes it hard to make up any ground because you're generally going to play those games later in the season to kind of highlight the rivalries and accentuate the divisional races.
Yeah, I also think of it as like, what do they have that we don't have? In terms of park factors, we were just talking like, what if Oracle Park is like a real problem for them? And it is like the hardest place in baseball to hit a home run, other than PNC. So maybe the home run itself is the issue. But in terms of ballpark park factors, the Padres are 24th and the Giants are 27th. So the Padres have dealt with this. And in terms of payroll, maybe they can't go up against the I don't want to use the word can't because I'm not, the chief financial officer for the Giants. But they haven't historically gone up to the levels of the Dodgers, but they can spend at the Padres and D-backs levels. So there's a little bit of like, there's something not right. In terms of player development, I probably put the Dodgers and D-backs a little bit ahead. In terms of coaching, probably put the Dodgers and D-backs, maybe the Dodgers. D-backs coaching has been a question for me because it's not like pitchers go there and get better.
No, I think it's still a tough place to pitch even in its humidor era. Like it's not early Chase Field, even 10 years ago Chase Field. It's not that park anymore, but it's still dry there. I think the feel of the ball is actually a little weird for some guys in Arizona. I know it's something that comes up in the fall league a lot, maybe less so at Chase Field.
Yeah, and at relative high elevation like we hit on. Mm-hmm. So, we hit on this, but I think it's worth reiterating with the Giants. That's why they traded for Devers. They have a hard time signing those big bats because guys know that it's hard to hit homers there. And as a big name free agent, you're going to get a ton of dollars, and you're going to be evaluated on that. And the discourse around your value will be wrapped up in that. And so, you either have to be really secure or know that you're going to hit a lot of homers in a ballpark that's hard to hit homers in.
Yeah, I'm sure that like when Alex Bregman was looking around at different places to go, he wanted to go to Boston over Detroit or San Francisco,
Oh.
Like in terms of legacy.
Him banging balls. Yeah, exactly. Banging balls off that monster. I mean, that's tailor-made for him.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's just tall hitters are on the brain or what exactly it is, but I did sneak a reverse mailbag question into the show. That's where we just ask ourselves a question. Sometimes we ask our listeners a question. I think any question would qualify as reverse mailbag, but I've seen a lot of chatter about James Wood approaching the single season strikeout record, and it's never a record you want, especially on your 23rd birthday, right? Happy birthday to James Wood, who probably doesn't listen to this show, but hey, gets a nice birthday wish if he does. And my reverse mailbag question is this: will James Wood always have an elevated strikeout rate, right? We're talking about a guy who's still in the very early stages of what should be a very long and productive career. I see him as a cornerstone sort of player for the Nats as they go through this rebuild. Last year in the debut, it was 79 games at the big league level, 28.9% K rate. That's jumped to 32.2% so far in 2025 because he plays every day with a strikeout rate like that. That's how you get close to those records that you don't want. So I wanted to break it down from a few perspectives. Like, James Wood doesn't have a chase problem. Right, 26.8% O swing. It's 33rd among 144 qualified hitters. So it's not swinging at pitches outside the zone. But I started to wonder if he needs to swing more. His overall swing rate is 40%. That's the 11th lowest of that same group of qualified hitters. He does not see a lot of first pitch strikes. That jumped out off the page to me. So I think the way he's pitched is very mindful and respectful of the damage that he could do. And then what also caught my eye is that his zone swing percentage is 57%. That's the third lowest out of 144 qualified hitters. Only Bryson Stott and Taylor Ward swing less at pitches in the zone. It's not necessarily a horrible list to be on because you see Juan Soto is there at number 5, but you have to have the other stuff Juan Soto does to be that selective with when you swing in the zone. If you look at the breakout, fastballs versus breaking versus off speed, you see whiffs on the breaking and off speed. As Jed likes to point out, James Wood does not have a problem hitting the fastball. He hits big league fastballs. So I just want to know, like, where do you guys think we go from here with the K rate? I popped up on the screen just the Baseball Savant card that shows up when you look at James Wood's page. Have you guys noticed yet on his spray chart for the home runs he pulls? It's like he hits them all out by an extra 30 plus feet. It's ridiculous. It's an absolutely ridiculous distribution. He hits them all over the
Illustrates
place.
The value of pull air right there.
Holy smokes.
But does it, like, I'm going to push back on that a little bit because look at all the homers all the way around the ballpark. And
that's true.
I mean,
do you actually need the extra 30 feet? You know?
Yeah, well, so I mean, I think it speaks to the potential, especially in the bat speed here. Right, you're talking about 76 bat speed, and DVR, man, you just stole all of my thunder because I mean, I'm looking at all my notes here, and this is kind of fun for me because I that was the first thing that popped up to me as well, and you know, maybe we've been working long enough together now that you know where I'm going with this. And I was looking at breaking balls, and he's hitting 194 this year with a slug of 314, and so then I was like, wow, that 44 number, like, it kind of jumped off the page to me when the batting average and the slug was that low for a guy who really doesn't chase out of the zone. So he's got the ability to recognize some pitches. But then as I started looking, I started looking at like Cal Raleigh, Ohtani, Aaron Judge, Schwarber. They're all in the like 40 to 45% range for breaking ball whiff rate. So I was like, okay, well that really doesn't explain a whole lot. And then I came to that Z swing where, you know, that I wrote it down at 55%, where Schwarber's at 64. The league is at 67. Schwarber's at 64. Judge is at 67. Ohtani's at 66. Cal's at 75% Z swing. So I couldn't agree more that a guy that has command of the strike zone by not chasing out of the zone to have a 55% zone swing. There's a lot of room for a little bit more aggressiveness in his approach that I think will actually cut down on some of the whiff and some of the strikeout, because then if you're more aggressive in the zone when you get your pitch, you're not putting yourself in a hole, and now all of a sudden you can't, you're in between pitches or you don't really know what's coming. You can focus on whether it's a zone or a pitch, or when you're in control of the at bat through the count, you can be more selective.
Yeah, I'm looking at his day-by-day graphs at Fangraphs, the rolling graphs, and I would show it to you, but it's a bit of a mess. And I'm going to circle this whole graph for you virtually and say he's domed up. And the way that I'll try to describe what I'm looking at. So he was doing really well in terms of his rolling production, his WOBA, right? And he was doing his weighted on base average was over 400 for like 2/3 of the season, and he was doing really, really well. Then he started going in the tank, and his reaction to that, and this I would bet $100 that this is based on a conversation with his hitting coach that sounds a little bit like what Jed's talking about, because after he starts, struggling a little bit, there's a spike in zone swing, and the problem is the spike in zone swing just brings with it a spike in chase, right? So the difference between his zone and his zone swing and his chase rate is 30%. So even though he just starts swinging at more strikes, he starts swinging at more non-strikes too. So it's just a general aggressiveness, right? And I think he realizes, well, that wasn't great. So then he kind of steps off the gas a little bit. Then he actually finds something where he's at 30% chase rate and 70% zone swing for a little bit. And that's the adjustment you guys are asking for. And he did it for a little bit, and he started climbing out of the basement. The problem is when he was that aggressive, they started actually throwing more fastballs. They started throwing a bunch of spin in the zone. They started being in the zone with spin too, and fastballs outside of the zone, so that he was just like domed up. This is where the domed up part of the graph is. And the reason that I'm hopeful though is that at the end of the season, for what he's done most recently, it's been about a 60 plus percent zone swing and a 20% chase. So he's gotten that from a 30% difference to a 40% difference. And he's found a way to be medium aggressive in the zone and passive outside of the zone. And that I think is going to be as important as anything else that's happened. Now the strikeout rate, the rolling strikeout rate right now is 40%. So that's the domed up part of it. But I think within the domed up part of the graph, you still see the beginnings of how he's going to be an even better player next year. He can, swing at sort of 60-65% of pitches inside the zone and only 20-25 pitches outside, keep 40% between. That'll be another level for him, because we know that he does so much damage when he does connect. He just needs to set himself up where he's not. You can see that he probably got told to do certain things, right? What needs to happen now is he needs to I would love to hear Jed thoughts on this, because I'm speaking as an analyst and an outside player, but I would say that he needs to sort of integrate that into his regular thinking process and not be thinking, I need to be more aggressive because my coach told me or because I'm trying to do something. He needs to just sort of normalize that and sort of get to a new sort of state of equilibrium. I don't know. Have you ever been told by a coach to be more aggressive or less aggressive and sort of played with that toggle and had a little problem with that at any point?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're talking about a guy that is 23 years old, couple years into his big league career. He's still, and this is what is impressive about the performance is that he's still kind of figuring out who he is as a big league ball player. Yeah. And I think really focusing and taking this year, which by the way was an all-star year, and refining what his routine is going to be to prepare him every day. That's what's going to get him more consistent. So whatever worked and didn't work throughout the course of this year, I think is learn, like whether it was positive or negative in terms of results on the field, it will ultimately lead him to a place that he can find the routine that works for him to perform every single day. And really the only way to go about that is experiencing failure and finding out what actually, like, what doesn't work. And then coming back to this place where it does work. And so I think for me, as I'm looking at a 23-year-old who has all the makings of a superstar, it's really about refining that approach, learning who you are as a major league player, the things that you can do well, the things that you can't do well, and continuing to exploit the things that you do well and continue to improve on that, and then cover the things that you don't do well to the best of your ability.
Yeah. Another way of saying it, just in the context of what we were talking about, I think is be aggressive in the zone, but don't just be aggressive. Like that's the small little toggle he's got to find.
And once again, I think that has as much to do with the routine, because that sets your mentality, right? Like if your routine, and I think that's where baseball players end up, good baseball players end up leaning on their routine, good or bad, right? Because if you start changing your routine when things are going poorly, and you start changing your routine because things are going poorly, that's a really quick spiral, right? And it's generally a down spiral, and it happens quickly. And on the same thing, like on the high note, right? If you're feeling really good about yourself, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, everything's going great, and then all of a sudden you lose that routine, things can go down quickly. So that's why baseball players, you have to maintain that just steady ahead approach and let the game take you on the roller coaster, because the results are going to do that. You have to be in control of the things that allow you to put yourself in a position to produce day in and day out. And that starts and ends with the routine, because you're going to see guys that, you day in and day out, some guys you're going to see better than others, but the routine has to stay consistent. And when you're talking about a 23-year-old who's 2 years into his big league career, that he's still figuring that out.
Yeah. See that.
Did we learn earlier this year that the Nats were one of the teams that did not have a traject machine? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
I think that needs to change. If I think they were one of those teams who are like, really? They don't have one? And again, breaking off speed, a little bit of the problem. But I think my reason for believing in more in terms of improvement from the K rate longer term from James Wood comes from the ability to recognize strikes versus non-strikes reflected in the O-swing percentage, and thinking a lot about other guys that have gigantic strike zones. I think Aaron Judge comps are sort of natural for anyone that hits the ball as hard as James Wood does, that also goes up there with a 6-7 guy strike zone. It just takes a little longer, I think, to realize, like, okay, this is how big league pitchers can attack me consistently. I have to close this hole. It's breaking stuff low in the zone and below the zone.
Why are they playing him at DH? Oh, don't do that. Don't do that with your young kid. Dude, they're playing him at DH. You're just by the numbers, you're 10% worse as a hitter when you're DH than when you don't. And we're talking about a guy that you really want him to be top step, and you really want him to be fully engaged, and like, maybe he's getting tired, or maybe this is a conversation they're having together and he's fine with it. But I'm surprised to see how many DHs are on his lineup tracker. He has played DH more than left field in the last 15 days.
Wow.
Yeah, it could be some wear and tear. Maybe there is an injury there that's also causing this second half slide for Wood that we just don't know about yet, too. That would at least kind of explain multiple parts of why things are turning out the way that they are. But a fascinating player, and I think still a guy that has a lot of bright days ahead of him. And one more Judge-related comp. Judge didn't even debut until he was 24 because he played college ball. Wood was drafted out of high school. So James Wood is still younger today than Aaron Judge was when he made his major league debut. And it took really 4 seasons for Judge before he knocked the K rate under 30%. And one of those seasons, his first full season, was a 52 home run season. You can be a very good player even with a 30% K rate. So I wouldn't be fixated on the flaw in this case, because I think there's a lot to like with James Wood. Let's go to the Eno Coaches Corner. Jed, you saw a story from Rustin Dodd on The Athletic over the weekend about the downside of specialization. And you've got young kids that are athletes, played in the big leagues. And I wondered, like, did you ever get a sense for how many of your big league teammates were actually specialized in baseball? Like maybe from a 13, 14, and 8 and beyond. Like, how many of the guys you played in the big leagues with do you think were multi-sport athletes into high school, at least?
Into high school, I didn't, forgot to take the poll when I was playing. But I think,
yeah, but you talk to guys and people, it's.
Yeah, no, I know. I will say this: the trend that I saw towards the end of my career matches kind of what the what this research shows too. I think it's happening more and more. I think players at the major league level, you know, I don't think the percentages have changed a whole lot. But I do think that there are guys that are still there that started specializing earlier and earlier. And then I like, you know, that's what this article is supporting too, is like the amount of wear and tear that comes up on that. And this is where, you know, I always think about end game, like what are we really trying to accomplish? If it is make it to the big leagues and have a career, you know, you got to make it under the current CBA, you got to make it to 6 years to really make any money in the game, right? Like substantial money as a free agent, unless you're signing a team friendly deal, which still can be a lot. But until you reach that free agent plateau, you really don't know what your true value is. So I always think about it from an end game perspective. I understand the temptation of specializing, especially when you have a world of, you know, NIL at the college level now, where there is an opportunity to monetize at the college level. But I was fascinated by this research. One of the things that really stuck out to me is, you know, towards the end of the article, the guy said, if you want your kid to be the best 12-year-old in your neighborhood, specialize him when he's 6.
Yeah, and my family is one of the few families that plays both fall ball and spring ball, baseball here in Palo Alto, and so I see the players that that do that, you know, and I you know, there's a couple that have actually stopped playing fall ball because of injuries and because of this idea. There's another kid on my team that is just playing right now flag football, track, and fall baseball, and his dad is really tired.
I hope he's got 5 stars on Uber.
Yeah, he is. He's funny though, because, and this might be a segue to an interesting point that you made in the pre-meeting, Derek, is just that he makes every catch as a basket catch in the outfield. Now, it's not how you would coach it, and I've been telling him, dude, this isn't football. You gotta put your hand up, put your glove up, and maybe he'll get there eventually. But it is interesting that he makes the catches, and that there are other people who play more that put the glove up and have done the drills and have done the drop step drills and have done all the drills that know what they're doing and don't make the catch, you know? And that you said something. What did you say about multi-sport guys?
What I noticed coaching high school soccer was that my multi-sport athletes were better problem solvers, or at least they had more unique solutions to problems. Just the kind of stuff you'd see kind of instinctively happen. So you think about basketball plays, ball's about to go out of bounds, someone like reaches, bounces it off an opponent, keeps possession for you, right? Stuff like that. You see that kind of quick thinking a lot more from your multi-sport athletes. Like
you might see that in soccer where he kicks the ball
out of
bounds.
Yeah, ball's going out of bounds, knocks it off a teammate real quick instead of trying to clear it up the line, or instead of trying to possess it or do something else that a soccer-only kid may have focused more heavily on, right? Again, that's one very random sort of example, but I think there are positioning concepts that are translatable from sport to sport. I think they learn things faster, but the number one thing that the research is going to always point to is the overtraining of specialization and what that does. It breaks down your body at all different ages and stages of life.
It's related to what you're saying. Like, the body is the same as the mind in a way, in that, like, you know, the body is just grouping muscles to try and figure out things. So if you give it one problem over and over again, it's just going to group its muscles the same way over and over again to solve that one problem. If you give it lots of different problems, it has to group its muscles in lots of different ways. So you don't get that sort of overuse where you're just stressing one ligament over and over again. You're also, you know, I asked the guys at Driveline one point, you know, how should I coach my kid? Like, what should I be doing with them? And they were like Jeter jump throws and like running and like, you know, just like play tag and like, you know, just, you know, like become more athletic, like do like tumble drills and run around and like, you know, just like do things that don't even look like baseball, because really what they need to do is just get stronger and get bigger. And, you know, getting too focused on like, does your elbow come through this way, you know, is a little bit weird for like a body that's also changing a lot. You know, it's like, you know, you don't want to like get them stuck in certain movement patterns where they have to just do that over and over again.
Yeah, they've got some research here and, developing guidelines in this article. And it says that it's recommended that young athletes not train in a single sport for more hours per week than their age. And then just from like a skeletal perspective, he said you don't want girls specializing until at least age 11 to 13, and boys should wait till at least the age of 13 to 15. Just from a skeletal perspective, that kind of to your point, like as their bodies are changing, you don't want to ingrain one movement pattern because it's just going to overload the body.
No, I'm happy to say that I have not necessarily run afoul of those numbers, but my kids also, the one thing I just would say for us is like, they don't really like other sports.
Yeah. Well, they don't really
want to play those sports, so they like baseball.
Of course.
That's the only thing they want to play, really.
I think then the only problem you could run into potentially is the overtraining thing. I think there are some kids that just like one sport. Great, go sing in the choir.
Yeah, so I give my kids long periods of rest. I give them, it's not too much every day. And he's whining now that he's got 3-hour practices, but he's also 13 years old, so. It's like it's okay.
He's kind of on that cusp, right? Where and especially when you have a very technical sport, it takes hours, right? Like there's no shortcuts in these technical sports. So you at some point you do have to specialize. I just think it's really healthy to have another outlet too, both physically and mentally.
Yeah, I get the sense that the ideal age to specialize, if something exists, would be more like 16-ish, like second, third year of high school. Because then you get to the point, maybe colleges are recruiting you. If you're in that sort of bucket by then, okay, you're good at these other sports, but maybe you do have to start dropping the third sport or maybe all of your other sports, depending on what it is and how much you have to do. But it really shouldn't be a pre-high school thing.
And you think... Yeah, and you think about mental health from that perspective too. Like you're creating you're formulating your identity as a human being in those ages, probably more than any other time in your life. And if you're specializing in a sport that you're going to be done with at 18 years old, because in baseball in particular, I believe the numbers at least a couple years ago were about 7% of high school players end up playing college ball. Wow. And then if you add in a couple more percentage of guys that get drafted or go to junior college, you're talking about 10% of high school baseball players that play past high school. So, and if anything, those numbers are going down, right? With contraction at the minor league level, with college programs, funding wise, like those numbers aren't going up. So you have more and more kids specializing and building identities around a single sport that they're in all likelihood, the numbers would say the vast majority of them will not play past high school. And now you've kind of built your entire identity around this one sport that you thought you were going to go. And I'm not suggesting that these kids shouldn't believe in themselves and that they shouldn't like go out and train and play baseball and do these things. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying there has to be another physical and mental outlet because the odds of actually going past are against you. So like, I guess this goes back to don't put all your eggs in one basket, whether that's baseball or even academics, like you have to have other outlets in life. And I think this is just another representation of that.
Yeah. Well said. Let's stay in the coach's corner for another minute. I think Eno's journey as a baseball coach might be worth chronicling on this pod because there's actually a lot. It sounds cliche. You learn a lot as a coach. You learn a lot about yourself. You make mistakes. Very good at this. Inevitably, you're new at it. I did it for 11 years, and I was still making mistakes in year 11. Like in hindsight, I thought I had it figured out after a couple of years, but no.
Here's the first mistake I made. I told the kids I'd never coached before. This is my first time. And
chum in the water.
That I might make mistakes and that we'd have some fun along the way. And they were razzing my fungo skills about 3 minutes later. And they thought that they had an in on me. Now I have a choice. I feel like this is maybe different than the pros. They're kids. Do I yell my way out of this? and remind them that I'm still a parent and I'm still older than them and I still have just some natural authority. I've tried a little bit of, I tried a little name dropping, and one of the kids said, "Who's Pablo Sandoval?" And I was like, okay, that's not going to work,
Right, because they're 12, right? They're not. They weren't around when Pablo Sandoval was the thing.
I just thought, giant, legendary giant. I was just talking to a guy about switch hitting. It's like, all right, and so I have told them more than a couple times now that I write about this for a living and I talk to pros, and I've tried using that a little bit. I've also I'm okay with, I make fun of myself and I'm okay with them making fun of me to some extent. Like I'm not going to yell my way out of this. That's just not who I am. But it is coming to a head a little bit because one of my players was kind of showing up his teammates on the field. And so now I need to talk to them seriously about leadership on the field and how we don't do that and how to like lead correctly on the field. And I have to do this in a way that doesn't separate the good players and the bad players on the team any more than they already are. There's already some cliques forming where there's like, we're the good players and those are the bad players, And so I'm stuck now where I need to do some team building, some conversation about leadership. And yet I don't know if I even have the credibility to do that. So that's where I am right now. It's really great. We have practice tomorrow, and I'm trying to figure out what to say to them and how to do it, how to separate them, how to even do infield and outfield practice, because I don't want to separate the good kids from the bad kids too much. It's all a head case, man. I'm domed up.
And it's the same, it's the same dynamics at higher stakes in a major league clubhouse, right? Like you're still dealing even at, 8, 9, 10, up to 13 years old, like there's still ego involved. Like, they don't have as much experience. They're probably not as good, but they think they are. Right. And so, you're in a major league clubhouse, you kind of have the same dynamics at play when you're building out a roster and when a manager is trying to establish lines of communication and trust. I think those communication and trust go a long ways in how you communicate, and how your relationships are with your players.
Yeah,
I think your level of honesty was just maybe a click or two too high on the dial for the beginning of the season with your experience, right? Like, it's okay for them to know that, but I think flat out telling them that to start might have just like put you on the back foot a little bit. You'll recover. Like, they're kids. There's a way to recover. But
yeah,
I feel like kids that age are just going to take anything they can and just like throw it back in your face.
Yes. They're like little psychopaths a little bit. It's crazy. I'm overwhelmed. Like, I guess I thought this would be more about baseball, but there's a lot of it that's just about how people interact with each other. And that's something I've been saying about managers in the big leagues. Is like so much of what they do is really managing personalities. Now I'm really in it. Now I really understand it.
and you know what? There's plenty of Major League Baseball players that still act like 13-year-old boys too. So
no, I've noticed this. I mean, there are people who show their teammates up. There are people who are on the mound like slumped shouldered after an error. And what have you seen managers do about this? Like, what if they're like, the pen blew it for us today, or like, or like, God damn, the guys who take their hats off and are like pissed at their shortstop or whatever. Like, what have you seen managers react on that, or does that self-police? Or
I think the best way to approach those are one-on-one conversations, where and you're addressing it with the manager and the player, because I think the manager is going to set the tone. And so if the manager doesn't say something about it, if it's just player to player, that has more opportunity to devolve and create riff within the clubhouse. I think if the manager addresses something like that, other players showing each other up, you can bring in the other player and have a conversation, amongst the parties involved. But I think a direct message to the player that the manager has an issue with, and set those expectations, and address it very quickly, is the best way to handle that.
Okay.
That's exactly what you've got, I think, with your kid that was showing up teammates, right? Like, you're not going to say everything to him in front of the entire team. You might have some things you say to the entire team that overlap with what you say to him in a one-on-one conversation. But I think the ego part of kids that age especially is if you are overly critical of them in the group setting, it is disastrous. It can be that big downward spiral we were talking about earlier, like where they they struggle for a while because of it. So there's a balance there, but you'll do great. You're thinking about the right things. So I don't know. Should we make this like a Discord channel, the Coach's Corner, where fellow youth coaches just bounce some ideas off of each other to help try and survive?
It's
not easy. It's not easy, but it's important work. So I'm glad you're doing it. I think you're going to have a good time with it as you get more comfortable over the course of the season. We're going to go on a way out the door. A reminder, you can join the Discord with the link in the show description. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, hit the like button on this video. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. You can find Jed over on Instagram. Eno and I are on Blue Sky. Saris.bscott@social. I am DVR.bscott@social. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this behemoth episode together. We're back with you on Thursday.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.